In the vast expanse of the African bush, a British conservationist flying solo crashes his ultralight plane. Severely injured and carrying no food or water in the wilds of Africa, his chances of survival are slim. His best friend desperately searches for him, knowing he may never find him. Staying alive takes all the cunning and guts one man can summon up. Zimbabwe, Africa, home to some of the most varied animal life in the world, much of it under threat from poachers and encroaching civilization. Greg Rasmussen was born in England but came to Africa as a young boy. For the past 12 years, he's dedicated himself to saving a rare species of African dog on the brink of extinction.
I've always been passionate about wildlife from day one. I mean, even as a child, I love the bush, I love Africa. It holds an endless fascination. I mean, it's always changing, and there's just so much to learn. It's like a book that just never ends.
Greg is one of the few pilots in the area, and even though he's busy with his own project, he's agreed to help a fellow conservationist search for a lost rhino.
People very concerned about the rhino, and National Park said, would I assist? And I said, of course I will. If wildlife needs help, I'll help.
Greg's a capable pilot, but flying a plane and tracking animals requires intense concentration, and he'll be flying over unfamiliar terrain.
And I was aware of that, I was fully aware of that, but we had rhinos that needed locating. There were poachers out there. I mean, you can't turn your back. I can't turn my back on things like that.
An ultralight plane is a cheap and efficient way to cover the African bush, but is also very dangerous to fly under certain weather conditions.
Temperatures in the day can be very, very hot. Tricky flying conditions for a light aircraft. Because, you know, it's hot, the air's thin. So it's quite hard keeping the plane up in the air. This was a very harsh, dry, rocky, rugged area. I'd never flown that area before, and I realized I was in a completely different territory.
The rhino is electronically tagged, and in no time, Greg's tracking device picks it up.
I just found it. I hadn't actually seen it, but I realized that it was alive by this movement signal. And I was just starting to circle out. And as I turned the plane, suddenly I went into something known as a wing storm. Literally, one wing's flying and one wing isn't. Suddenly I had this gut-wrenching feeling. I put full power on the rudder. Pulling back on the stick, I was doing the right thing, and it wasn't working. And the plane started to go down in a spiral. And the ground were coming up pretty damn fast. And then there's a split second. You know you've passed the point of any return. I almost didn't want to open my eyes. I didn't know what I was going to see, what I was going to feel, what I was going to find. I was totally dazed, stunned. And I was like, I'm alive. I'm alive. And at that second, petrol started dripping over me. And I just pulled myself out, literally almost fell out of the plane. As the petrol started to come down, I had these visions of this wall of fire. And I could just see myself being incinerated alive. And I knew my legs were doing nothing. I couldn't do anything with the legs at all, but I just had to get away from this plane. I mean, this thing was a nightmare now. And then I suddenly thought, Mayday. I've got to call Mayday. And I didn't want to go back to that plane. I didn't want to go near it. But I had to brave it, because I knew that that was my only means of survival. And I knew the quicker I got a message out, the better.
Greg has to try and make a call. No one knows exactly where he is or that he has crashed. He has no survival gear with him, no food, no water, and he's severely injured.
Mayday! Mayday!
And the whole handset was hot. The crash had short-circuited all the batteries and had literally fried my only means of survival, the emergency radio. And then something happened that literally just changed almost everything. The pain hit, because the adrenaline had worn off.
On the outside of his body, Greg has only a few superficial scrapes, but inside he is bleeding badly, and his legs are broken in 6 different places.
That was a pain that I'd never experienced before. Anything like it, anything that even came close to it. My legs felt like they were going to explode from within. My feet were just doing this. My legs were just one big lump of jelly. And I realized I had to stay in control. You know, I had to be in control of the situation, because if you lose control, that's it. I was going to be a goner. I started to try and take stock of the situation. And it was quite a harsh reality. I suddenly realized there was no 999. There was, you know, if I was going to get out of this, it was only going to be me and me alone.
Greg is over 70 miles away from the nearest road. By the time anyone realizes he's in trouble, it may be too late. The brutal heat of the African sun will bake him alive. If he survives that, he will face worse horrors. As night approaches and hungry predators come out to feed. Unable to move, Greg is easy meat. But right now the pain from his smashed legs is all he can think of.
There was this pain in my ankles. They felt like they were going to explode, because I'd got these boots on. Yeah, and of course there was no space for the swelling to go. There was no way I could even get anywhere near my shoelaces. But I was thinking, if I don't get those boots off, there's going to be gangrene, and I'm going to lose my feet. I lose my legs. I managed to look back, and I thought, well, maybe if I can drag myself to this tree, I can tilt my body forward so that I can maybe get to my shoelaces somehow. I wanted to stop that pain. Because, I mean, it was like my foot was exploding.
Fate is being cruel today. The closest tree to Greg is a thorn tree. But as its thorns dig deep into his back, Greg realizes they might be useful.
And I managed to just break a twig off that was about a foot long, and it got a hooked thorn on the end of it. And I lay there and I could hardly focus. There was just so much pain. I started to pick the shoelace. I thought, well, this is all I've got. And I remember I had a little flashback to childhood, because I was always absolutely useless with shoelaces. I then realised I had one chance. If I pull and the knot doesn't spill, then I've blown it. That's that foot gone.
Greg manages to loosen the shoelaces and get them both to the same stage, but nothing happens.
But the boots remained absolutely solid on my feet. And I realised then I had to pick the shoelace, eye by eye, through every single eyelid. And all the time, all I'm thinking of is, if I don't get those boots off, I'm going to lose my feet. And it was almost, it was like a nightmare. Ah! I had to remain as focused as I could. And I picked and I kept on picking until I finally got to the point where the shoelace was free. Ah!
Loosening his boots isn't having the effect Greg expected. The pain is just as bad because his feet keep swelling up to fill the newly expanded space. He has to try something else.
I saw a stick. And that was all there was. I thought, well, that's the only tool there is that I can see other than rock. I'll go for that. And as I even just touched the shoe, the pain was just, it was terrible. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not, you know, and now I've got to push this. And absolutely bizarre, you know, then I had a flashback to a movie. You know, I mean, ridiculous. It was a John Wayne movie, you know. Oh, well, you bite on that while I cut this. And I grabbed this stick. And as I pushed and I bit, this stick was just rotten. It was full of termites. And my mouth was now even drier than before, and I went, but I pushed with such force. The shoe came off. And I just forced the other shoe off. And lay there. And I looked at my watch. And it had taken me 2.5 hours.
200 miles away, Greg's best friend and colleague, Peter Blinston, waits for him to return. Together they run a conservation project dedicated to saving the African painted dog, one of the world's most endangered species.
We have this same passion for the dogs. We have a lot of belief in each other's abilities. And that just comes through at the end of the day.
Peter, phone call please.
The phone rang. I just felt nervous. This kind of sense of something's wrong.
Yeah, Peter.
It was Norman English, he's the warden over at Cinematella. He said, Greg's missing. People talk about this kind of cold hand or something that grips you, but I really did just go like icy cold. I was then thinking, I have to find him.
In the heat of the midday sun, the temperature is now over 100 degrees. Greg hasn't had any water for over 24 hours, and his body is rapidly showing the effects of dehydration.
It was hot and it was dry. There wasn't an ounce of moisture in the air. I hadn't drunk the whole day because an elephant had destroyed the water pipes in our area where I'd taken off from. It wasn't like feeling thirsty at all. It was almost like being tortured. Everything was just so dry and your skin just didn't feel like skin anymore. There was no texture to anything. You know, you tried to touch with your tongue to touch the roof of your mouth. It just felt like it wasn't there.
As Greg lies out in the open, a vulture, quick to sense a meal, lands on a nearby tree.
And I thought, not yet.
Yeah, I'm not ready for you, mate.
It was scorching hot. You know, dehydration was going to be my next enemy to deal with. But also predators was a major concern of mine.
The animals that Greg devotes his life to saving could now turn against him. The landscape is alive with wild beasts looking for food. They may look sleepy and harmless in a city zoo, but in their natural habitat, they are deadly.
My fear wasn't the predators themselves, it was the fact that I couldn't run away. Here was me lying with a pair of legs that were just jelly.
Greg knows he has to find shelter, both from potential predators and the sun. His only option is the plane.
Fire or no fire, I got to get back, and I got to face that plane again. Every single movement was terrible, but I realized that it was that or die. I tried to pull, and I had no more energy. I've come this far, and now I've got no power anymore to pull on my back. And I suddenly thought, I've got to roll over.
Because he's a biologist, Greg knows that some species move more efficiently on their stomachs.
I thought, how am I going to roll over? How? I had 2 shoelaces and a stick. I made a loop on the end of one shoelace and tied it onto the end of the stick. I hooked the stick underneath my leg. And I knew that this was going to be one very, very painful experience. And I had to just concentrate on what I was doing, because I knew what was coming. I almost had the fear of pain before it came. Just as I rolled, I heard a crack. It wasn't the stick, it was my pelvis was broken.
With the temperature now hovering at 110 degrees, Greg is literally frying in the sun. As he drags himself towards the shade of his downed aircraft, his thoughts turn to other dangers that threaten his life.
Being in the bush for so many years, you get to know absolutely every single noise. You know every footfall. You know which footfall belongs to which animal. I was terrified that maybe something would come and sneak up on me. And I couldn't do anything, you know, I mean, I couldn't run. And then I heard elephants, a whole herd.
It is in fact an entire herd of elephants, and they're moving right towards him.
And I thought, they've got to sense that I'm here. If they detect you at the right moment, that's fine. If they detect you too late, that's the scary bit. Because then you're in their attack distance. And I thought, if the wind is wrong and they don't detect me until the very last minute, that's when I'm in trouble. And then suddenly there was this huge screech of... And I remember just thinking, oh no, please, just don't stampede. And I just had this absolute fear that I'm going to be trampled.
Greg has dodged a bullet. The herd moves on away from him.
I wanted to cry at this point. And I realized then that I couldn't have cried even if I wanted to. There was no moisture for me to expend on tears. They wouldn't have come anyway.
The head warden of Cinematella Wildlife Refuge, Norman English, organises a search and rescue party. The park is over 700 square miles. He and Greg's best friend, Peter, can only start looking for Greg where the rhino he was tracking was last sighted.
Did he radio in at any point?
Nah, no radio contact at all. But he was searching up near where the rhino were last sighted.
The rhinos are tagged, right? If we find them, we find Greg.
Greg took the only tracking device we have with him.
Without a tracking device, Peter and Norman have no way of knowing where Greg's plane crashed.
I was sure that he was alive, but you know that you've not got much time. Almost as each minute passes by, of course, you're becoming more and more concerned.
What about an aerial search?
Already started. Pilot from Victoria Falls came up in his Cessna.
I was thinking, we have to find him. Even if you've survived the crash, there's animals, there's wildlife that can kill him. The chances of him surviving are getting slimmer and slimmer.
Peter and Norman have no idea that Greg is 40 miles from where they think he is. Greg's condition is now critical because of his injuries, exposure in the hot temperatures, and lack of water.
I was so close to the plane, I could smell the petrol. I gave it all the energy I possibly could. And just as I got underneath it, something felt a bit sticky on my mouth. My lips had turned to rubber. They'd plasticized. And a piece of my lip came off. And it went to the back of my throat. You know, I suddenly came to this horrible realization. I just swallowed my lip.
The But within moments, Greg has a new worry. He hears the sound of an animal walking nearby.
It was lion footfall. And I listened very, very carefully, and it was getting closer and closer. And then I heard this call. It was a lioness. And lionesses have a very distinctive call they use when they're calling cubs. And obviously, because she was a mother with cubs, that makes her far more dangerous.
Greg knows that animals in the wild have a unique defense strategy. They make sharp, sudden noises to scare off their enemies. As the lioness moves in closer to Greg, he knows that creating a noise at the right time is his only defense. When he finally sees the big cat's silhouette, he makes his move. With daylight fading, the search pilot will soon have to return to base. There's still no sign of Greg or the wreckage.
I heard the plane. And then I started to get almost excited. And then I thought, no, I'm still a needle in a haystack. They had an area to search of about 1,000 square kilometers. And I wanted to scream, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Hello! Hello! I almost wanted to will the plane in, come my way, I can hear you, please. Hello! And then there was silence. I remember that silence now so well. It was killing. Nothing is going to happen now until tomorrow morning at the very earliest. And I've got to start thinking about the night. And of course, as a biologist, the night is always a dangerous time anywhere.
It probably won't help much. I'm just going to take the Land Rover out, see what I can find.
There's no way you're gonna find him in the dark. We don't want to lose you too.
I won't be long. I'll be back soon.
I suddenly came to the harsh realization that there's not much left of me. I'm a mess. And I actually, at that point, I thought, do I really want to carry on? Did I want to live, or did I want to die?
As the night closed in, it was an awful feeling. It was really awful. I was trying to imagine what it would be like for him now, still being out there.
I thought about my life, and I thought, well, I've had a good life. I have achieved. I was suddenly, for a very short period of time, I was at total peace with myself. I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of that death experience. I suddenly realized that I had it in me, the power to just switch off and just let myself go.
People started to voice their doubts that he was now alive. I was thinking about what they were saying, and for a moment, thinking maybe they're right. But I wouldn't hear that. Greg wouldn't give up, and neither will I.
And then I suddenly thought about the dogs, what amazing animal that had become my sort of whole raison d'etre. And I thought, but there's a hell of a lot more I can do. And from that second, it was like, right, the fight is on. At that point, there was just such a kick in me that it was like, I'm going for it, and I'm going to make it. And I'm not going to, if I do die, I'm going to die fighting this right to the bitter end.
Night comes on very quickly in Africa, and with it a blanket of darkness that provides cover for the predators. This is the time they come out to hunt.
I was trying to picture how terrifying, really, it would be, even for somebody like Greg. You would almost wish that he were dead and not have to face a night like that.
At that point, there was this total silence. I could hear my heart sort of boom, boom. It was that silent. And it made me very conscious how totally alone I was. All I wanted now was for that night to end. I had this nightmare that a hyena was going to come up behind me. I know what hyenas are capable of. Bone crushers, as they're also known. They've got the most powerful jaws of anything. I also know someone who was carted off by a hyena, and he was a fully able-bodied man, but he was sleeping and they dragged him away. That was the biggest scare of the lot, that a hyena might come up behind me.
Are you all right?
Yeah. Thanks, Norman.
Peter, the men feel like Greg may not have made it.
You'll get through this. He's a stubborn beggar.
Yeah, well, you know him better than they do. They, don't think there's any point in him going out again tomorrow.
He's alive, okay? You know Greg. He wouldn't give up. I won't either.
I'll talk to the pilot and the others, see if they can give us another morning at least.
Thanks.
I was terrified to even think about going to sleep because I knew that I wouldn't wake up again. That would be it.
Then Greg's worst nightmare comes to life. Once again, he recognizes an animal by the sound its feet make when they touch the ground. He hears a hyena.
And I thought, it's coming behind me. And it's going to come right in the worst spot. It's going to come round the back, which is where I really had absolutely no control.
Once again, Greg uses his knowledge of animal behavior. He grabs hold of his stick and gets ready to hit the plane with it and create a noise to startle the beast.
And I waited until it seemed like forever. I knew if something came one step closer, then would have meant that I'd failed. Then I heard this, like, just footfall, just getting less and less and less. I remember lying there at that particular point thinking, is there anything else that's going to be chucked at me? You know, what else is going to come? You know, what other brick's going to come down?
Greg does his best to stay positive. In 1 hour, the sun will rise and he will have made it through the night. But it is one very long hour.
It was very frustrating waiting for the daylight to come. I contacted our office. We had 15 people that could come over and help with the ground search so we could cover a wider area. And they were there. They came, ready and waiting to help with the search.
I watched, looking for the sun to come over the horizon. And when it finally did, I felt these rays coming all the way towards me. And it was an amazing experience. I suddenly felt wonderful. I was bathed in light and heat and warmth. I felt secure for a moment. And then the harsh reality dawned on me that it was that sun, that burning, was going to continue and it was going to kill me.
At first light, the spotter plane sets out again. It'll make a systematic search of the places where Greg's plane might have crashed. At Peter's suggestion, Norman is on board.
He knew the area better than anybody. I really felt strongly that if anybody was going to find Greg, it would actually be him.
The additional members of the search team fan out, but they're still looking in the wrong area. It's been nearly 24 hours since Greg crashed, a deadly amount of time to be out in the African bush injured and unarmed.
You know, I was beginning to doubt if he'd survived.
Greg has a global positioning system, yet the technology is useless if he can't tell anybody else where he is. But every time he turns it on, it records the exact time.
I was checking on the GPS, trying to get the coordinates and times. And then I suddenly had this horrible feeling that this GPS was almost acting like a record of when I was still alive and when I died. If I was dead when they arrived, Peter would pick up the GPS and he'd look at it and think, oh my God, he was alive at, I don't know, 11:40. And it's now 12 o'clock, and if only we'd... And he'd have been left with this eternal guilt. And I almost wanted to destroy the GPS at that point.
Norman to Peter, can you read me? Over. Norman to Peter, can you read me? Over.
Receiving.
There's nothing from up here. Even an elephant could merge into this landscape. We're going to try another area.
On a hunch, Norman decides to go back and check along the beginning of the route that Greg would have taken. Nearly 24 hours has passed, and Greg's body is desperate for water.
I managed to grab a piece of the broken windscreen. I had this mad idea to see if it would collect moisture. And then I heard this plane. And when I heard the plane get louder and louder, I thought, right. I was going to try to see if I could get something out of that radio. Basically, it was all I had left that I could think of. Even if it gives the weakest signal, it's worth a try. And I gave it all I'd got. I remember it now.
Mayday. Mayday. This is Zulu Mike Echo Bravo calling Mayday.
And then my position is
20 miles east-northeast, Cinematella. Mayday.
I thought I heard the plane get louder. And I thought, it's worked, it's worked. And I gave myself almost an elated sort of feeling. But that's because that's what I wanted to hear. I knew I was lying to myself. Mentally, I had to stay with it. Because if you get into depression, that's it, the game's over.
Not knowing whether he's imagining the search plane or if it's really there, Greg grabs a piece of his wreckage, one of the struts, hoping it will reflect the light and be seen by the plane above.
Mayday, all search parties. We've located the wreckage. 40 miles south of the main search area. No sign of Greg.
I was trying to keep up the dream that they had really seen me. But I realized I had to keep telling myself this lie. Because I did know that I was reaching the point of no return. If they didn't find me soon, I was going.
We can't land, I repeat, we can't land, we're gonna have to go by road. Meet back at the base camp immediately. I repeat, meet back at the base camp immediately.
I felt numb. I wanted to see, you know, what was there. I wanted to see Greg. I wanted to just get to the site.
He's here, south of the road. The rhino's obviously moved.
Okay, let's move it.
Peter, I didn't see any sign of life. I don't know if it's a good idea that you come.
I need to see him.
I was really afraid. You're just thinking, okay, we've found him, but we don't know what we've found yet. And you imagining all sorts of horrors.
And then I heard these footfall. I can't describe. Of course, I knew what footfalls those were. And among them was Peter. And I suddenly looked and I couldn't believe it, that was him. I couldn't even speak to anybody, and people were just saying what happened, and I just had to say, wing, stall, and that's all I could say.
It was really overwhelming. He'd survived. And it was sort of affirmation of my belief in him.
The feeling that I wasn't going to die was just indescribable. I'd fought this and I'd won. And somebody came up, I hadn't got a clue who it was. Someone put their hand on my shoulder and said, "You're in safe hands now."
Since the accident, Greg has undergone more than 100 operations to save his legs. Through grit and sheer willpower, he has learnt to walk again.
Of course you don't go through something like this without there being change in who you are. I always treated life every day as precious, but it's even more precious now. I still am dreaming of that day when I go back to Africa, back to the smells, back to the sunrises, the sunsets, and most importantly, the painted dogs and wildlife conservation.
Greg has indeed returned to his beloved dogs. He continues his conservation work alongside Peter and has never flown an ultralight plane again.
Tina